borrow one of the paper rubrics from the perfect.
To present a vocal performance of two French art songs, so a collective piece of performance art that highlights the research of this particular variety of French melody. And the two pieces that I will be performing today are by Emmanuel Chabrier. The first describes the life of cicadas that sing very raucously, and the second describes the somewhat impetuous life of little ducks traveling around a pond. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you.
today, I would be delighted to answer any questions either about the research or about the performance that you might have.
I do have a question about the research. So I think I read in there, I read it really fast, but your program notes that you took from different performances that you watched.
Yes.
So it's kind of a conglomeration of them. Is that also true for the pianist in the way the piano was played? Did your research impact, like, did you give him instructions to that impact the way he played?
That's a great question. So we've rehearsed these a number of times. While I didn't send him, let's say, specific performances to, let's say, emulate, what we did do is talk through the different areas and different segments of the piece, and we very roughly choreographed, if you will. You wouldn't say choreographed because that's normally a theatrical term, but in classical music, you look at the expression of a piece. And so we discussed the different elements of musical humor in different moments, in different phases. So the ending, let's say, of the first piece, when he's playing the different chords, and he may or may not be adding a couple of notes here and there for the sake of musical humor. When we have that little interchange of him playing notes and me looking back like, what did you just play? He didn't play anything wrong. It's me thinking, oh, the raucous noise of the cicadas, finally, it's done. I have peace. And then he plays another note, and the cicadas are back. So yes, we had those dialogues more so in a communicative fashion than actually looking back and saying, hey, how do other accompanists play this? Because in all honesty, when you look at the performances that are available, you don't see quite as much of that pianistic interchange. So that was an element I wanted to emphasize as well.
Okay, so you did see it somewhere, but not as much.
Mostly in facial expression, not so much in the actual technique. Especially the second piece, the more dramatic ending of Il Vent de Petit Canard, when he lifts his hands and he plays the last world arpeggio so dramatically. That's not something that would typically be performed, especially in classical music in this way. But so the examples that are out there for research mostly focus on facial expression, but he was able to sort of personify the humor in those instances.
And I will tell you, I started out listening to the first song thinking to myself, well, if I understood French, I would probably be giggling, here and there. But then by the time I got to the end, I actually was laughing a little bit out loud because I could understand, like you said, that last interplay of, okay, this is done, no, it's not, yes, it is, no, it's not,
Yeah.
So that was keeping really funny.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there were other funny parts in there, and your facial expressions did a good job of telling me that. So, yeah, it was just do you have?
So I actually thought of the same kind of things when you were mentioning that. Why Chabret?
Why Chabret? Excellent question. So French art songs in general have been a performance interest of mine more than a research interest of mine. There have been other French art songs that I've enjoyed studying from a performative sense, but I haven't done up to this point a great deal of research on them. And so it was interesting to see someone. We don't hear as much about Chabret as we do other composers, and so it was interesting to actually go in and do the research and see some of the connection. Francis Poulenc actually was his biographer after he had passed, and he saw him as sort of a grandfather figure or musical legend. And it's interesting because we see these elements of Chabret's work repeated through the years. And even Chabret was a late Romantic composer, but we see his influence throughout the modern, even into the modern era of music. We have Poulenc actually had it's called a bestiary, a bestiary, little beasts, a whole song cycle that describes, you have dolphins, you have all just the different types of animals. And so we see Chabret kind of hatching this idea, to use an animal term, if you will, of having these descriptive pieces infused with musical humor that is very dry, very witty. It's not, okay, we're going to make you laugh and you're going to know exactly what you're laughing about. That's not what we do in classical music. So starting from the performative side, a set of songs that I enjoyed performing, but then also bringing in the research and being able to express that, really the way that it's conveyed, the act of performance art, in a way that is edifying to the audience.
Why you did mention that the pink pigs and the stout turkeys, those ones are performed
search for them, there are performances out there, but they are very few and far between. This is actually somewhere where I would like to go with future research on this, is to perform the whole set, so that we're not just talking cicadas and ducks. We can incorporate other animals as well. I think probably the reason for that is because these two are published more frequently. So the Anthology of French Art Song, which is kind of its standard vocal repertoire, these are the two pieces that are featured. These are the two that I came across when I was researching these kind of animal pieces. And so for that reason, I think the others have just faded away. They're easy to grasp. They're not incredibly difficult. They're around the same level of performance as these. They incorporate a lot of the same humorous elements, but I think it's just a simple matter of not being published. So I would love to actually include those in a future performance and have the whole set.
So it's not that they're big parts of a loss, or they're out there available to perform.
They are out there and available. Yes, you can look online. You can either IMSLP is a great resource, or you can also purchase the set. So they are available. Mm-hmm.
And maybe you already answered this as part of it. So we've seen certain performance styles, like, I don't want to say change, but when composers are rediscovered, or when certain pieces, like particularly instrumental pieces, are played with a more modern sound versus like period instruments. You don't hear about that so much in like art songs. I'm not as familiar with the French, you hear that more in German. Are there different, I guess, interpretive styles? You mentioned Bernac, and you mentioned that volume that this comes from, but is there a greater range of interpretive styles? And then obviously you chose one that fit with what you wanted to convey.
Yeah, excellent question. And you could, honestly, this is an area you could do an entire research study on, is examining different types of performance and looking at the performance paradigms for each different style. So take, for example, if we're going to perform Bach, even if it was a humorous text, we're probably not going to do this. There's a different expectation through musical eras. And it's interesting, if you look at different performances, some professional, some semi-professional, you could say masters, doctoral level performers online, you'll see examples of performers who very much played into the humor, almost to the point where it lost some of its wit and charm. Bernac and some others say that Chabre gave the instructions, but they didn't take the instructions quite far enough. Like the performers may not be completely sure of how to perform based on the original intent of the composer. And so later editions of the music have some of these things we don't know. In fact, there's some areas where it's not clear. Were these editions, do they have stylistic markings and things added? We don't know that fully, but when we look at original scores, we see much of the same musical notation. And so to answer your question, when you synthesize that information, you see performers who take it almost too far. Right? There was one performance, and I was tempted to do this today, but she has a sack next to her, and she has different sizes of rubber ducks, and she brings them out of the sack and sets them on the piano, and they get increasingly larger throughout the performance, and finally, the giant duck at the end. Comical performance, but it gives it away. It says, I'm singing about ducks now. Can't you laugh? Right? And there's other performers who sing it, and they just look tired, right? And so we want to avoid both of those extremes. We don't want to just look like, oh, I'm singing another French song. Most French art songs are either about the depths of love or the depths of sorrow. And this does neither, right? This is a humorous little anecdote painting a scene in your mind in a way that you can connect with not only the storyline, but you can engage with that humor without taking classical music so seriously. So we see both extremes with that, and what I would say is just, if you're going to perform humorous classical music, especially of the French melody genre, you want to study the works, study professional performers, see what they do, glean the best of those things, stay true to the pieces. We're not gonna add giant changes in the actual score. We're not gonna go through and slash and burn things. But we're gonna tweak the expression. We're gonna tweak things like volume, Things like facial expression, certainly, and also things like articulations, which can add to the performance. Great question.
Can you give an example of an articulation? Like, is it a decision to hold out a note longer, or you know, make your voice go up and down as you sing the one note, or is all of that really out?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So if we look at the first piece, Le Cigale, the second to last verse, the middle verse, into the chorus, I would hold out the long phrase before doing sort of a portamento, which is a yes. And so I'm not going to take a breath in that particular phrase, and that's for a specific stylistic reason that connects with this idea of these cicadas are driving me nuts. They won't stop. You know,
But that's your interpretation. That isn't in the music.
It is correct. Yes. Some performers do it, and some don't. Same as looking at the watch, kind of just giving a slight nod down at the time. That corresponds to the word semidi, which is essentially it's midday. It's midday. They're singing. Right, so you're going to look down and you're going to add those artistic elements based on not only the performances that are out there, but also your own interpretation, and then ultimately what the text is telling you. So you're going to look at the words and say, hey, what does this word actually mean? And how can I present it in a way that reflects the humor?
Great. And then my last question, the language. Did you already speak French before you tackled these songs, or did you really have to research?
Great question. I do not speak French. I know some French. If I landed in Paris, I could probably find restrooms and order food, which are two good things. But yes, I don't speak French. The way if you're approaching classical music and you don't speak a language really as your native tongue, the first step in doing that, and this is part of the research process, is to use what's called IPA, or the International Phonetic Alphabet. So have you all seen a schwa? It's the little upside down E. If you're looking in the dictionary, it looks at that little upside down E symbol. That is actually a symbol that's taken from IPA. So IPA is a symbolic language that really, it tells you, once you know that and can understand how those symbols interact, it allows you to go in and you write the IPA under each line, and that tells you it's your key to pronunciation. So I know that Les Cigales is pronounced a certain way, and Villeneuve de Petit Canal, you're not gonna, there's advantages to knowing certain things about the French language, silent consonants at the ends of words, certain nasality, so I know a little bit of that background, enough to be dangerous, right? But using the IPA and writing that in is always my first step.
And then I imagine listening to the songs a lot.
Yes.
Breaks the pronunciation.
Yes, and listening as much as possible to native speakers speak the language. There's one of these for Les Cigales. I'm not sure that there is one available for Villeneuve de Petit Canal. I'm not sure that there is one for that, but Les Cigales there is.
So what are the common ways to get translation of the songs today? So your book might have a translation. If it does not, what would you do?
Yeah, great question. So the book that I was using, which is the French Art Song Anthology, it does have the translation. There's two different types of ways that translations can be done. One is more, it's kind of like Bible translations. One is more poetic and it's singable, so it rhymes, basically. And the other is a little bit more of a paraphrase, right? So that's the paraphrase kind. The other kind is a literal translation where you're going word for word and you know exactly what each word means, but if you sang it, it would sound terrible because it sounds like the and the, and it doesn't sound very singable. So the book actually takes the more paraphrase singable approach. And what I like to do is I like to go in and find the nouns and the verbs. And I'll go through, sometimes I'll circle my music, sometimes I'll highlight it, and you find the nouns and the verbs and you determine what those mean. As someone who doesn't speak French fluently, but knows a little bit, I can pick out which words are going to be the important words. Once I know what those are, I know that dans l'eau, we're talking about water here, or we're talking about crestonieri, the little watercress patch. I can portray those things through my performance in a way that reflects each of those elements, as opposed to saying, well, I know what the paraphrase translation says, but the words may not actually align, the English translation may not align with what I'm saying. So in that case, I would go through, pick out the nouns and the verbs that I do know, look up translations on those, use different language resources, and then kind of copy those in so I know the major outline of the piece.
And that also helps you understand the nuances or the play on words or the joke, as it were, within the poetry or researches that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Was that a question or a...
There's more comment.
Okay, yes, no, definitely. And also being able to use resources to see what the original idioms are in the language, because as in English we have things that, to people in another country, if we say, oh, go break a leg before a performance, they may get a very concerned look on their face, right? So we have things that we know, internal jokes, and each language has that, so being able to recognize those things as well when something doesn't immediately make sense. Thank you for your time today.
Are you the next judge? What am I on? This is my friend. Okay, thank you. Got it.
Excited? Bittersweet. No, I mean, probably I go back to the library. I don't like scheduling stuff. So like we go it's not all the databases we have. I just put numbers for it. Originally I got that right weeks later that got disbanded and sent it in with 3%. And so I was adopted. So it's a bit patchworky, and then they gave me like a real file. And I still have this research. I'm sure that goes easy. Yeah. Gotta get it done, you know? So my degree is in psychology, so I have a lot of peers that do presentations. I've seen theirs, but for the most part, like during the day, I help make sure that everything's where presentations are going to be. So they're like, yeah, you get to do it. Like, okay, cool. You're gonna do great. So yeah, they have me come over here and help them stuff like that. So yeah. It's actually really cool. Especially with all the at least. One for me to like really, I don't know anything about like artistic stuff. It's like seeing things really good. Because I don't like, I don't really have that emotion aspect of me. I still have different you're just good on yours. Yeah, I'll do it. Thank you for that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mark, for filling in. But I will make sure to. Yeah, I appreciate you filling in. See you, Mark. It's really cool to like see that. Because I would not want someone to like go to a piano concert. Now I know. If she's presenting. If it's not her. Yeah. It's also very different when you see like your theatrical. Then like, yeah, the original theater one was good, but like without the remaining piece, it's very different. Yeah, I think yours is very true to like I guess what the idea of research performing arts is. Like, you did a lot of research, brought all this stuff together.